Failure is real, but it's how you define failure. For me, failure is just not giving it your all, not trying your best. Athletes nowadays can learn from founders the journey as well in a different light. When you're a founder, you get told no a lot. Professional athletes, we aren't used to being told no. It might take 7 to 10 years to see a return on your investment because you just have to understand the journey. Our new age athletes, it's instant gratification. I want it now, I want it now, I want it now. I want to be drafted, I want my commercial, I want my own shoe. No, you have to really understand, you have to appreciate the position you're in, you have to go take your bumps and bruises. That's the only way you really learn. You learn through your losses.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat for you today. Coming to you from
the hotel lobby
in London. We had to get this person on the show. We had to make it work. So even though our video quality and production quality is not great, the content is going to be off the charts.
We're told that the security guy won't take us out of here kicking and screaming.
Yeah, it's a true honor to have him on. And let me get the introduction right. So because we often have the saying that this person needs an introduction, and sometimes I mean it, sometimes I just really don't. People like hearing that. But this person genuinely does not need an introduction because finals MVP, multiple rings, multi-time gold medalist, has an amazing podcast with Evan Turner, which I've been binge watching for the last few days. You absolutely check out, right? Author of Six Man, which is a fantastic book. Longtime friend of Andreessen Horowitz, an investor, which I think over 50 different companies, if I get this right, which we're all going to get into. The man you want taking the shot if the universe is on the line. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Andre Iguodala. Andre, thanks for coming on.
It is a pleasure to be here on your show. I find it, the hardest part is working with somebody you live with. This is amazing. So I applaud you both.
I mean, more to me, right? Yeah. I mean, I have to put up with this guy. So.
All right. So, Andre, first of all, thank you. I think lots of us, we've seen you do so much on the court. And what some people, maybe not a lot, know is what you've been doing off the court. And there's lots, but I think one particular area is how you've been such a plugged-in investor, right? I remember, this is going to sound like one of these, I was at this fancy party, but Andre and I were at a fancy party many, many years ago, and I met him, and, sometimes when you meet an athlete, you're like, oh my gosh, you talk about this amazing play, or you're a fan. But what I remember about meeting you and meeting, Rudy, somebody you kind of work closely with, is how plugged in you were into my world, right? Yeah. So I went this is somebody I talked to, a fellow investor, right? Setting aside that you were on national TV the previous night. So we're going to get a lot of all the basketball stuff, but maybe let's start here. How did you get started in the world of investing?
Tech investing.
Yeah, investing in startups, and how do you kind of get into our world?
Well, it's quite interesting. I go back to being a rookie second-year player in the NBA. And a big part of who I am as a person is curiosity. And the more tech, financial, investing books that I read, the more I'm hearing about curiosity, because you have to have a sense of it, especially when, you're trying to do correct due diligence. You have to learn the business. You have to learn, so many different types of disruptive tech, insure tech, prop tech, health tech, e-commerce, fintech. There's so many different places that it can go, and they all move similarly, but they're each unique in their own ways. And so you have to just love learning, because it's something that comes up every single day. You talk about the blockchain, cryptocurrency, AI now. There's so many different places that you can go.
Yeah.
And for me, since I can go back and remember, I've always been studious and I've always been competitive. And so I've always wanted to be, I didn't always want to be the smartest basketball player. I always wanted to be that, but also I wanted to be the smartest kid in the classroom. And so when I got in the league, you hear so many horror stories about, financial literacy, putting your trust in the wrong financial advisors. Yeah. And, once you get to the root of it all, it's not on the athlete, 9 times out of 10, because if you don't know, where to get milk from, you're going to buy spoiled milk more often than not, because you don't know where the good milk's at. And it's basically all it is. And for me, I just always was always trying to surround myself with, smart individuals, people smarter than me that can lead me in the right direction, whichever way it may take me. It's like law of attraction. And I was able to meet Rudy, my business partner, early on. And it wasn't a business relationship. It was more of a friendship. And you're just looking for someone to challenge me and help me grow as a person and just, level up me just being a basketball player. And so, just looking at stocks differently, starting to follow, I tell guys all the time, take your Twitter feed, take your, or X feed now, and take your Meta feed. The Meta feed is WhatsApp, it's Facebook, it's IG, it's Reels, so many different places. You got TikTok now. You can set your feed to feed you information that, they say your 6 friends you're around the most is who you become.
Yeah.
But early on, I just surrounded myself and surrounded information that would come in that would, help me be a better investor, or just help me learn about what my financial advisor was doing with my money at the time. And, slowly but surely you learn about bonds, you learn about stocks, you learn about, small cap, mid cap, large cap, just learning the basics. And it just led me to, you hear about, you got public shares, but you also have private companies that put private shares. And you ask yourself, well, what is this private space I keep hearing about? And so, from that point on, I just started setting aside time to learn about different things. It was like school of hard knocks. You just learning on the fly. So as opposed to me, going back to school and getting my degree, I did take a bunch of classes to get towards my degree, but the things that I really wanted to learn, it wasn't for me.
Right.
And so I did some internships. I did an internship with Bank of America, Merrill Lynch early on. Since then, I went to Morgan Stanley and did some internship. I followed Jeff Jordan and Andreessen. I was at a Monday morning meeting, following him around, and just shadowing folks and just trying to level up, who I wanted to be off the court. And it's been a long road, and that's something people don't see, the work that's being put in and behind closed doors. This wasn't just a vanity play to say I'm cool because I invested in companies. No, I really wanted to. There's a mission behind it all, and a part of that mission is, you're very well of it, is minorities participating in this world that we naturally haven't been able to participate in, since the beginning of capitalism.
First of all, I just love that you're an intern. Like, I can just imagine going like, oh, we have an intern, like, and then you walk in, they're like, I was not expecting you. Seriously though, you've been, at the tippy top of the sports world, right? Like playing with some of the greatest players, sort of coaches, etc. And what I like about you is you have now also been behind the scenes in the room where it happens, of the business world, right? Like, you invest in like Coinbase, Robinhood, the list kind of goes on and on. What do you think the startup founders and VCs that you run into could learn from Steph, from Clay, from Steve Kerr, and all the people in the sports world, and vice versa? What are maybe the lessons from the business world that you kind of taken into the locker room or onto the court?
That's an amazing question. I think what you see in our world is people don't see how many reps we put in. Like we do it over and over and over and over and over again. It's funny, Marshawn Lynch, more clip when he's like, I'm gonna just keep running to you over and over and over. And he just kept saying over and over. But the focus on every single rep is just like, it's almost like it's your last rep. And so it's like, this is the last shot you get to take. And you're going to try as hard as you can and be as fundamentally sound as possible to make your last shot ever, right? Now imagine doing that 600 times every single day. You shooting every shot like it's your last shot. And that's the focus, and that's a level of intensity that we approach our craft. And you see the finished result, but everyone wants the result, the success. But, when you show them the road that it took to get there, like Steph Curry's underrated film he just put out was incredible, because it started out with him failing. He had like 13 turnovers the first game. He missed all his shots. The team blew out, and no one sees the struggles for him, like the journey it took for him to get there. Like, he just didn't show up. The greatest shooter of all time. Like, he really had to work at his craft. And I think that's something that founders can see. Like, failure is real, but it's how you define failure. For me, failure is just not giving it your all, not trying your best. like you understanding the journey. Like, but you're going to have days where you may not get better like you want to, but as long as you're giving it your all, you'll have success. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, athletes nowadays can learn from founders the journey as well in a different light. And when you're a founder and you start up, you get told no a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And athletes, professional athletes, we aren't used to being told no. And so it's a humbling experience. It's a humbling experience, but at the same time, founders, you have to scratch and claw and beg for everything. Like you got to beg for funding. You got to get your employees to take shares because you try to keep your costs low.
Yeah.
With the salaries, and then at the same time, it's learning the journey as well. In our world, it may take 7 to 10 years to see a return on your investment because you just have to understand the journey. And as our new age athletes, it's instant gratification. It's the Instagram, it's the Twitter/X, it's Sports Center, it's I want it now, I want it now, I want it now. I want to be drafted, I want my commercial, I want my own shoe. But it's just you have to really understand, you have to appreciate the position you're in, you have to go take your bumps and bruises. That's the only way you really learn. You learn through your losses. Athletes can definitely learn that from startup founders.
It's a fantastic answer. I mean, off the cuff, that was it was so nuanced. To me, at least, I know the founder side of the story, and it's totally spot on. Where it's a long, grinding road, right? Like you just get told no so much, but every time you hear a no, it kind of motivates you to just keep pushing and keep doing more and better. I love that for you. I mean, you're over 50 investments deep now. You're more serious than many investors we know. What do you look at when you look at, say founders or opportunity to invest? Are there patterns you look for? Are there traits for founders that you look at where you're like, that's a winning combination. That's a company or a space I want to be in, kind of thing. What do you look for?
And actually, I want to add one thing to what Aarthi said. Do you think you bring a sixth sense from what you do in the sports world where you can size up a human being, a founder, in ways that maybe one of us can't?
Yeah.
Well, I joke about this one a lot. I have on golf gear. I don't get to play golf as much as I would like, but that's like my peace place. And I joke, but I'm serious. It's my excuse to get out on a golf course. But I spend one golf round with anybody, and I will know exactly who they are by the end of the round. Because you see what makes them. You see if they're competitive. You want somebody with that competitive edge. So you want to see someone upset at a mistake. Like they should be pretty pissed that they didn't hit the ball how they wanted. But then you get to see how they respond when something doesn't go their way. Or you see if someone nudges the ball back in the fairway if they cheat, or are they honest? It's so funny because it's just a simple game, but there is a level of respect that a lot of the great golfers had. Is like, no, I'm taking, if I accidentally touch the ball, that's a stroke. No one else is looking but me, and I can say I got a par, but I got a bogey. And so you start to pick up patterns. How do they respond from a bad shot, or how do they respond from a good shot? Or, most good golfers are a little cocky. They can have egos. So you just see every end of the spectrum from someone on the golf course, and throughout experience, I've gotten to know some people very well through golf. And the other side of it, people that want to do business with me, I play golf.
2 questions. One, why is Steph so unnaturally gifted at all these sports and so good at golf? And second, you, Steph, J.R. Smith, who's winning?
First question, I have an answer on why Steph's so good at anything hand-eye coordination. Just go watch the movie The Accountant.
Yeah,
yes.
I have. It's one of my favorite movies.
Oh gosh,
it's
yes.
So good.
It's one of my favorites. So I've never said this, and I don't know it's a compliment. Steph's somewhere on that spectrum where he's like this weird human being where he sits above us all with his skill set.
Yeah.
So he's good at every sport I've ever seen him play. He's good at, and he loves golf. So you know how it goes when you have a passion and you're good at something. Great things are going to happen. So that's why he's so good. And he played at a young age too. That's a big advantage. And Steph is the best in the NBA. Out of all NBA players, he might be the best. Jerry West was really good in his prime at golf. He had some country club records that people don't know about, but Jerry West is really good too. JR is a sandbagger. I like to call him a sandbagger because he doesn't like telling people how good he really is. And so he'll hustle you. But that's a compliment in itself as well. I was really good like 2 years ago. That's when I was playing a lot. But I just been working. I've been working too much, which I'll work hard now. And then my ultimate goal is to buy my own golf course. So if I get a few more 10 baggers, it's if I've had one now. I haven't cashed out anywhere. But if I get a couple 10 baggers and that's all I want. Like, I don't really care about the money. I just want my own golf course.
I think a bunch of people watching this are going to touch up their golf game before they play with you. They know you're looking at them.
Wait, so I just going back to the previous question, right? We're talking about what do you look for in founders? And, you can kind of tell through a game of golf, you're probably looking at how competitive they are, how do they respond to competition. What else do you look at when you're like, I think I need to write a check with this company kind of thing?
Yeah. It's just seeing them on a human level. I know they've heard no before. How do they take on criticism?
Yeah.
How do they take on that constructive criticism, which is a big thing for us all. We all have our egos. Sometimes you may miss. I was listening to an Andreessen. I heard Mark Andreessen speaking on why they missed out on Google because everyone passed up because of the founders or the typical. The personalities didn't fit the investor, but they missed on that just because it's like that. Those aren't our personalities we want to invest in. So you have to be wary of that, or you have to be careful that you don't look too deep into that. I will also say a really big part of founders. I think it's more so. It's not how you get along with them, just the vision. And their conviction behind their vision. Like if they really believe in something and they just continue to fight for it, and here it is. Not being afraid to admit what you don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Because how do you have an answer for every question?
Yeah.
You get some founders where you ask them a few questions, they have an answer for everything. And it's, well, if you're still short on capital, you're still raising, if you have all the answers, you should be oversubscribed. Quite naturally. But I've found a few founders who they will be honest and say, I don't have the answer to that. And that's something I'm trying to solve for. And those are the folks I'm like, it's like a breakthrough when you admit that you don't know something.
I think founders sometimes have this weird idea that they need to say that there is no competition. There is nobody else doing this, that they're the only ones, and they haven't answered anything. But the world doesn't work that way, right? Like things can happen. You definitely have competition, and you know it, we know it. And the more you can have an honest conversation where you're like, you know what, those books are good, or maybe Google can put 1,000 people on this and destroy me tomorrow, but the odds are it won't. And then we're like, okay, that's what I'm thinking, and at least I know you're not bullshitting me. And I think that that honesty really, really
that matters. And also I think the older we get, I also really appreciate people who are humble enough to say, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. And you realize that when you're younger, you want to be that like sharp, bright person in the room who seems to have an answer for everything. But you also know that it's almost a sign of immaturity. Like it's okay to say, that's a great question. I don't really know. But, why don't I just come back to you on that? I'm just going to do some research and actually follow through and come back.
Yes.
I kind of respect founders who do that and I've seen founders who've like blown me away. They'll just send me like, I did this and I spoke to this other founder who'd done a similar thing. And this is what like I learned from them. And then I did this like whole research thing. And I'm like, okay, like you took it seriously. Like I really respect that. So it's just something that through the course of years, I've started to appreciate more.
Oh, yes, because we know it's true, it's true, and we get that. Okay, I want to change gears a little bit because when I think about this, I was thinking about the similarities between the sports world and the tech investing world. And one place is, on the rise of podcasts, the ones we're doing now, that were like All In, like there's a bunch of others. And, when I was reading your book, I was rereading it last night, just kind of prepare for this, right? And I was kind of reminded of, let's just say sometimes some of the challenging relationship you had with the media, right? Like, the sports media.
Yes.
And one thing that struck me was I say we in the tech world, I think you're very much part of our world now, but we in the tech world have had a very similar challenging relationship at time with the press that covers us. The dynamic is different, but often you're like, hey, that's not true. You have an agenda, you have a narrative. And over the last few years in the tech world, we have seen a lot of people like the two of us, the All In folks, a lot of people, very, very different styles, all putting out their own content, owning the narrative, just being out there, right? And in the sports world, just take basketball, right? Like you and Evan, Draymond, right? Like Podcast P, Redick, who I think might be the first and the best at, and some of this, right? Do you think the dynamic with let's just say basketball, the basketball press has changed now because players, you can just go out there, have these open, honest conversations with the peer that they couldn't in the past?
Most definitely. Evan and I were recording for season 3, which should be dropping in early August. So not August, October. So we're about a month and 2 weeks out, a month and a week out. And we were interviewing Trae Young, and Trae Young has his podcast, To The Point. He just started, or he's been up and running. And we were asking him what was behind him wanting to start his own podcast. And his response was just with his interactions with the media and having his words twisted a few times, because he doesn't speak a lot. He's very soft-spoken. But when you catch him in his element, he talks a lot and he's very thoughtful and he knows what he knows. And so when you have your run-ins with the media that don't go so well, then you shy away from that. And I ran into that when I played in Philadelphia as well. It's a tough sports town. All athletes have to go through it. And I remember one of the articles was Andre McNabb. They said I was aloof. They said I was standoffish. I wouldn't embrace the media. It wasn't that I wouldn't embrace it, but I had to put up a shield because I didn't know which angle the reporter was going to go after with the questioning. And I had some really good conversations. I never forget, I did one for Sports Illustrated. They did a cover piece on me, or it was ESPN and magazine is what it was. And it was a great article. It wasn't ESPN. I think it was Sports Illustrated. And I was talking about how good Lewis Williams was offensively. And it was all praise. And I made a joke saying, and we joke with Lou about his defense sometimes, because no one can stay in front of you on offense when you're on offense, but on defense, you can't stand in front of anybody. We just kind of joking, and the reporter laughed and he made a joke about it. And he was like, but the article came out and I got destroyed as like the worst teammate of all time. And even the writer said himself, he said, I didn't write this in this manner, but when it's taken from a third party and it was someone else took the line and made an article with themselves, it was taken out of context. And, speaking to Trae Young, he said, I started this because I want my fans to hear my voice. I want my fans to get to know me. But it's hard to do that when every interaction with the media is just taken out of context or it's not done in a manner that is good for me and my interaction for my fan base. And so why not take the narrative and put it in my own hands? And also, there's some value in that. And you see a lot of athletes doing that now. Yeah,
I think one thing to change for me is, like there are some people I kind of gotten to know a little bit, like you, for example, but the others who I'm just a fan. Watching the podcast has completely changed my mind on them. For example, Paul George is probably the greatest example. Never met him, always thought of him as like a quiet, like amazing player. But when you listen to him on his podcast, like him at DeMar, I'm like, oh, this is a totally different individual than who I thought. Same with Dame, right? Like getting Dame to talk about the trade or how he feels about not having a ring. I was like, I didn't know this was such a interesting, complex. I should have guessed, but I didn't know. I was listening to the Kelsey brothers, fantastic podcast, by the way. They are like, shoot the shit. One of them, or both of them said, like, doing a podcast in some ways is actually harder than playing a game. I am curious, like you and Evan have done a couple of seasons. You guys are fantastic. I love it. Like, what do you now know about doing a podcast that you didn't know when you started? What is easy? What is hard? What do you now know?
Our podcast is work, like real work.
Tell us about it.
It's like 9 to 5 work, like real work. And so not 9 to 5 because we're around the clock, and it works with Evan and I because we escape the harsh realities of being a professional athlete when we're around each other. And so like my spirit animal is Evan, and then I'm Evan's like disciplined spirit animal. And so I need that confidence sometimes where I'm too hard on myself. And every time I'm around Evan, I feel like I'm the best at what I do. Like Evan makes me feel like I'm one of the best basketball players of all time. And I'm like, okay, whenever I'm down, I need to be around you. And I feel like I'm like Evan's big brother. Like, okay, Evan, like let's try this and try this approach. And so I'm like his sounding board when he's making some decisions, and so I help him with that. And so that's the fun part. So it doesn't feel like a job, but You got to do your research. You got to plan things out. You have to be hyper focused. It's almost like a tech startup. Like what's your niche to entry? Like, what are you going to do that no one else is doing? And then how can you separate yourself from the crowd? Because obviously it's become a crowded space, but I think we all can exist as long as we're being very organic to who we truly are. And so that's what Evan and I have been trying to do. And it's been a ton of fun, but it's work. Like, you got to record some days. I might rather want to be playing golf, but it's, this is a business now, and this is more than just, having a conversation and just, talking hoops or talking about what we're talking about.
That is super spot on. I mean, for us, we've been doing this for almost 3 years now. It started out like very goofy, fun and games kind of thing. And now it's become this thing where if we miss a week, people will like leave us comments or send us emails being like, hey, I wanted to go on my run. Where's your podcast? Like, what's going on? And so we take it seriously now, and we have 2 small kids and everything. So travel through all of it will make sure that we have episodes in there. But people don't realize how much work it is. And we know this because there are weeks that we want to give up. And the thing is, like, we'll be like, no, we can't do that. We just have to keep going. And so for us, this is very much like, it's more than a passion project now. It's something that is like, we've started this, now we can't give it up.
Yeah.
And we've seen so many people who would start, and they started with us, they started after us, they would ask us for advice, it's all well-meaning, but then they just won't persevere. They would just like give up halfway. And I'm like, well, do the first 20 episodes and then we can chat. Like, we kind of are like, do 20 consecutive episodes and then we'll like come back and talk through stuff. So I appreciate that you're saying it's a lot of work, because even if it is a hobby side project, it still takes time and it takes effort.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying that, because there's been a few times where, and sometimes you can only see what you see, and that you can get in your own way as an investor as well. Like, I like something a lot, I'm going to invest in it, but it's because your vision is blurred because your emotions are attached to it, as opposed to thinking, does it follow the fundamentals of a business that's going to be able to scale? And sometimes you can be blinded by that, and so. With the pod, sometimes I'm thinking to myself, like, I know this is good, but it may not get the reception. Like, I had a few episodes, I'm like, these are amazing episodes.
Yeah.
And why is the count so low?
Oh, I know. Oh my God. We do the same thing.
Yes. or vice versa. The ones where I'm saying like, it was just so generic. It was just bland.
I know.
And now it was like, it got a lot of hits. I'm like, what?
I know. I'm like, I don't at all understand how this whole world works. I'm so surprised every single week.
Like, I would never presume to give you advice on anything, but on this, I would say the thing which we have learned is you got to do the thing which is fun for you. Because if you burn out, right? Like, if you burn out of the reps, everything stops. So one of the things I've learned over time is kind of like, just trust my instinct. Otherwise, you just psych yourself in your head, right? Let's say you're like, I need to get to that story, I need to get to that spot, and this is a juicy bit, and you're not in the moment, you're not present. And
also don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up, right? Like, and you got to, it's like it's kind of the cliche. It's one of these, like, you're putting the work when there's nobody in the gym. Okay, one question on podcast. A lot of players have podcasts, right? Like, who is a player who does not have a podcast who you think will absolutely kill it and should have one?
Oh, I got the guy that's good, but I don't want to say his name because I'm trying to get him. And I joke one time with Evan. I was like, listen, we got to get to him before he realizes how good.
Okay, pick somebody else then. That can be a secret.
Then it's an insult. Then it's like, well, not the best guy, the second best guy.
I'm gonna pick this guy. So Lewis Williams is so funny. Like, he's a natural cool person, and he's a great storyteller. We're seeing it with Jeff Teague right now. Jeff Teague is doing really well, and I love seeing Jeff Teague. Like, I'm loving all the guys jumping into the space. Like you said before, as long as they just stick with it and stay with it. Like, don't jump in when it's cool, and then it's gonna get hard around episode 30 when you just gotta show up to work. Like, all right, you got your best 30 stories now. You got to keep it coming. But I think Lewis Williams has a ton of things to say.
Yeah.
And there's another guy that I think they will be really well together. And so I'm going to be down in Atlanta and I'm going to pitch him. I'm going to pitch him.
You're going to be signing You're going to be signing some folks up. I love it. Iman Shumpert, like his story. Some people are just fantastic storytellers, right? Something you said recently. Well, somebody went viral. So I want to ask you about this, right? You said Jimmy Butler is the closest in the NBA to Kobe, right? Like
Kobe's mentality.
Oh, okay. All right. We're going to cut that part out. We're just going to make this go viral. Like Andre claims that Jimmy is the reincarnation of.
You see what I mean? So, Gilbert Arenas is one of the smartest basketball minds that I know. And I know basically all the basketball minds. And he has understood exactly what I was trying to say. And I knew it would get taken out of context because they would take out the word mentality.
Mm-hmm. This is the time to set the record straight.
Right. But I also said, maybe it's last year, Paul George is the second most talented player in the NBA. And so people would say, you said Paul George is the second best player in the NBA. I was like, no, I didn't say that. I said he's the second most talented. We all know who the most talented player in the NBA. That's Kevin Durant. And, when you look at somebody, just their physique, their body movements, their skill set, those two guys have no flaws. And so that's what I meant. And so, when I'm talking to other athletes and other players, it might sound like these crazy, bold statements, but I'm speaking to our fan base and, this is something you're missing. And we can't figure out why Jimmy Butler keeps winning and going to the finals. Mm-hmm. And it's because he will find a way to win. He has this crazy mentality and he has this crazy confidence in himself that says, I will figure out a way. And I haven't seen too many athletes out like that. And the greatest athlete I saw in that manner was Kobe. And Jimmy's in the same realm.
I love it.
I'm really glad, just as a side note, that you're doing the podcast and you're encouraging other people to also do it, like get on the show, that kind of thing. Because in our world, like I know very little about basketball, but in our world, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, and one of my constant frustrations has been how things get taken out of context. Mm-hmm. But also, for us, technology has been so good for us, right? Like we come from middle class kind of background, no business being where we are doing what we do if it hadn't been for technology. Everything good in our lives have happened, including us meeting each other, has been because of this. And so when we look at media and magazines and journalists, just constantly taking on an anti-tech narrative, for the sake of it, tech deserves criticism. There is, everybody, you look at it, we all deserve a fair share of it. But the entire narrative has become so anti-tech and anti-founders and anti-entrepreneurship. And that hurts because there is so much goodness in the world that happens because of, investing in tech and building innovative products. And for us, this is kind of our way, similar to what you do in the world of basketball. Is for us, this is our way to go direct and get, people like you, other founders, everybody else to come on our show and tell the story and go direct to the people who are wanting to listen to them and hear their voices directly. So totally relate to why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's podcast, it's Instagram, it's whatever, right? You just own the story, own the narrative. You don't need to go to, Sports Center. You just put out a story and it's great. Okay, switching topics, I want to talk about finances and money in the world of sports, right? Because I think you've been such a massive advocate over the years about making sure people get their fair share. And I want to ask kind of a few versions of this. The first one is, I've been so fascinated in the last few months about a few things. One, Messi playing for Miami and the deal that was struck, right? For the first time, him getting a rev share of Apple's subscription revenue, right? Never been done before, might be a precedent. He turned down, rumoredly over $1 billion from, one of the many Saudi teams. We just seen Neymar go there to Saudi. We seen Mbappe turned down an offer where I think Giannis said hey, I just look just like him. I can come down there. And of course, Ronaldo goes there. I am curious, right? What do you make of all of this? Because you've always been very smart. You talked about, for example, LeBron timing his deals with TV rights and so on and so forth. What do you think of what is happening in the world of soccer, one with Saudi Arabia, but second with the MLS deal? And what do you think that means for the NBA?
Well, I think it just shows the strength of sports globally. And at the crux of it all, what is sports? How do we define it? And I've come to define it as community. That was really the foundation of sports. It's, aligning with one another, setting our differences aside as a community within our community, and because we want to go against another community. And then it just spreads worldwide in terms of, what do you stand for? What are your values? What are your goals in life, and how do we come together as one? And then how you do it in a way where it's a respectable manner. It doesn't have to be war. The Olympics. And it's like we take pride in our country and, being able to have the best team, work together, communication, all those things. The race to the moon is a very competitive thing. We just saw who went to the southern, what was it? The
India.
South Pole of the moon. India.
India,
India, right. And whose rover crashed a couple days before? Theirs didn't quite land successfully. Was it Russia? I forgot who it was.
Israel was a couple years ago.
Yeah, trust me, such a big. There's about 1 billion people who were so thrilled yesterday when, because it's such a big deal for the country.
And multiple attempts of which were not successful. It's the entire country's been looking at this mission, and for I think for all of India, this is such a big deal because even 10 years ago, this felt like so far out and kind of impossible, and so now to be one of 4 countries who can do this is just kind of incredible.
But I think for me, and you kind of talk about this well in your book, right? Like where you talk about, like, for example, and by the way, your book is fantastic. I just say everyone watching this absolutely go buy it. It's just like Andre is so interesting in it, highly, highly recommended. And you talk about, like, for example, your trade from Philly versus how you handle the trade from Denver, right? And I think one of the themes that came across, like you sort of like acknowledging, like, hey, I have real power here, right? Like this is a business, right? And I need to do the right thing for me, my family, my career. And one of the things I think about the Messi deal is it's a recognition of the power of, an individual like Messi. By the way, after it's been amazing, he's been like knocking it out of the park every game, obviously, right? But I can totally imagine, like a future, even not, I don't want to say future LeBron, like LeBron or, like somebody in the league saying like, hey, like I am kind of like, I am one of the reasons, people are watching these clips on Instagram and, having a more, like a proportionate share. Like, I think it kind of like changes the conversation.
Yes. I didn't want to stray too far from the question in terms of, just how powerful sports have become. And the athletes are getting bigger and stronger and doing things that have never been done before. The game keeps evolving. All the games, whether it's football, whichever country you're in, how you find football. It's basketball. You're looking at women's soccer / football has just been hitting out the park. We had a great World Cup this year. Spain was the first time winner. You're just showing how the dream team was at the forefront, the original dream team taking basketball global. And then now soccer / football is having the same effect on America, actually, where football internationally and soccer in America has been coming, is growing as a sport here. And I think it started with our women. So it's beautiful to see how our women are starting to get the respect they deserve. And we were having a discussion, and I don't want to get into a gender conversation, but there's some sports that I prefer to watch the women than the men. Like golf is my favorite sport, but if I want to learn how to be good at golf, I need to watch the women as opposed to watching the men in terms of the fundamentals. The women, they don't swing out of their shoes. They don't go crazy. They hit. I think the guy who's number one in fairway accuracy in the PGA Tour would be 77th on the women's tour. Now, the course may be a little shorter, but the women are hitting the ball way straighter than the men. They're more in control of their bodies. They're not over swinging. Everything has a flow and a rhythm to it that most amateurs, we need to follow that same formula. But the athlete is also becoming smarter, with more access to information. The internet is just information, and the more information out there, you have to be cautious of what information to take on, because the more something you have, the more nonsense you have. But I think we're getting smarter with understanding business as well. I need to file a patent for this term, the athlete GDP, and just when you really think about that, it's just up there globally. You look at all the African American athletes in the world. I think it's like $5 billion per year.
Right.
Collective salaries. That's just the salaries, not how much money we actually generate worldwide. You see, technology has actually helped the athlete and team owners with these evaluations, with cord cutting, and now you got all the advertisers looking for live eyeballs. The place to get it now, where you can get a guaranteed number, are sporting events, and entertainment, and the cable bundles only holding on because of news and sports, but more so sports. And now you're seeing what's going on with Disney and what they want to do with ESPN. They're selling off some assets, but there's one asset they're trying to hold on to is ESPN, because they understand, how powerful the viewers are and how you can sell to them. And I think the athletes have gotten to learn that, and that's why you're starting to see Messi doing the deals that he's doing. You're seeing LeBron doing the deals he's doing, Steph Curry doing the deals that he's doing. They're starting to understand like their global effect and how they should rethink the way they're transacting. It's not really transacting anymore. It's really taking a piece of the pie.
Yeah. I want to switch gears because I really want to ask you about this. You cover so much of this in your book really well, which is just kind of the mentality that goes into being, a Steph, a Clay, Allen Iverson, one of these people. And sports is super interesting because I think in any realm you have people who are just amazing, but you can't see it, right? Like you and I can't see, the insides of a boardroom or insides of many other domains. But in sports, right, we have a reference point, which I think makes these conversations easy in some ways. At least there's a version where like, okay, I at least know what, I can understand. And you talk about different kinds of player mentalities. Like, for example, you always been regarded as one of the smarter thinking man's basketball player, right? And one of the things I think you talk about is for a shooter like Steph or Clay, like they don't care whether they are, on fire or they're like 0 for 10. They're letting it fly. And I think that's interesting because when you're a founder and you're in a meeting, there's a difference between like, oh, this last 7-8 pitch meetings didn't go well, versus like, oh, I'm just going to back myself. So I am curious to talk about that, because I think you talk, what makes a Steph and a Clay when they get the ball and they're open, what is going on in their minds versus maybe a mere mortal basketball player?
It's interesting because, one thing you have to be a successful successful in anything, but as an athlete, one of the more important things is confidence. And I know some guys who could be Hall of Famers, but they never got the confidence they needed. And that's why we always talk about how the stars have to be aligned, and it's more just who you are. Sometimes the situation you're in, a lot of more athletes are speaking on that. There's no such thing as a bust. Maybe a player wasn't as good as you thought he was going to be, but that's you just maybe you don't evaluate talent well. But a lot of times it's the situation a player may end up in. I always joke, or not really joke, I'm serious when I say, you got some athletes, if they had the wrong coach, they may not turn out to who they ultimately could be. Sometimes, you have obstacles in your way that won't allow you to blossom in the manner you should because of the business side. And that's why I always speak on, there's the business side of basketball and there's basketball. And you always want the basketball, the actual game. You want the game to just outweigh the financial side, and it always have that's the right balance where basketball is just above on the scale.
Of all actually, this is interesting because, I think the confidence thing is so important, right? And one of the things, for example, and I'm not saying this just because I work for him, like Ben Horowitz is very good at, is, coming to like a young person, or somebody earlier, even somebody like me, and, just instilling belief even at times when you're in Harvard. So you you played for, so many of the great coaches, and maybe not so great coaches, but great ones like Steve Kerr, etc. Who do you think has been the best at making people, instilling confidence, and maybe tell us a story of how you've seen them do it?
Yeah, well, I'll tell the story a few times, and it's hard not to go back to it, but Mark Jackson. And, I've been in the locker room where Mark Jackson told the entire team, and this is, it's understood, but it isn't said enough, where the head coach lets the entire team know who the man on the team is. And I heard Nate McMillan, he had done it with Brandon Roy, and it showed it the way Brandon Roy played. But when Mark Jackson told our entire team who the guy was, Steph Curry is our guy. He's our player. He's our all-star. He's the one that's going to take the big shots. The ball's going to be in his hands. Like, he's the guy where he's the head honcho. There is a hierarchy here, and he sits at the top. And I think that gives Steph a ton of confidence, but also lets everyone know, one thing we won't have an issue with are egos clashing or getting away and saying, who's the guy? It's interesting because when I got into the tech space, I started to investing, and then I'm doing fireside chats, and I'm talking to teams about winning cultures and, how to overcome culture issues. One thing a lot of the founders, CEOs will say is, we have an ego problem here as well. And I will always think, these are the brightest minds in the world. You come from Stanford, you come from Harvard, you come from Ivy League schools. Like, how hard is it to get these guys motivated? And they said, no, the motivation's easy, but everyone doesn't work so well together. Like, one guy's upset that he didn't get this job, or he doesn't have this title. And I was like, whoa, okay, this isn't just in sports. And so, but going back to Mark and, just seeing how he spoke to us about Steph, and even Clay, if you get the ball and if you can see the rim, you have the green light to shoot. That doesn't go for everyone else. And so just hearing that, I'm not one of the green light guys, but I had a new level of respect because it showed me, this is what the coach sees, and we all, the guys who know, but the majority, it's a bunch of guys on a team who they want to play for the next contract, or they want to be in the other guys' positions. And Mark Jackson let it be known, it's like, no, that's not your job here. And we need those guys to be who they ultimately are for that trickle down effect for everyone else to get open looks, or to just go along with the engine and how it works for the system. And, I think you need to hear that more to have a more cohesive and a great sense of, how the ins and outs and the keys of success will be for a team.
I actually think in some ways it's easier in sports, and I'll tell you why, because in our world, in tech world, there is no scorecard, right? Like,
right.
So at the end of the day, like, one of the few times I've seen any one of you play, I'm like, I can never do that. So much of, in tech, you're so abstract, or the results could take years, and you don't exactly prove that, that somebody like a Giannis is, dramatically better than, somebody at the other end. You just can't prove that. So it's a lot harder. I think in sports, at least you're like, well, I see why that guy has got the big contract. But I think the other part of on the ego side, which I think is really interesting for me, and I think you fit into this, is I've seen many players say they could have been the guy, the franchise player in their team, right? I think of like Chris Bosh, for example, as a great example of this, right? Like Bosh, in Toronto, the franchise guy. And then, and then D-Wade too, right? The franchise guy from Miami, sets their egos aside a little bit, right? Like, and then say, okay, we're going to come together and I'm going to accept a supporting role. How does a player work through that? Do people struggle with that? Because in the business world, somebody's like, well, I don't know. I don't want to be the number 2 person. I don't want to be the number 3 person, even though it's the right thing collectively do. How do you think the best players handle it, and how have people seen people struggle with it?
Well, we can talk about this for hours because it's a very interesting debate going on at the moment. How much is the NBA championship worth? And you had a guy who made $200 million for career earnings with one championship, or no, a guy who made $200 million, no championships, or a guy that made $100 million with one championship. And the question is, which guy would you prefer to be? And but it takes away from the reason why we should play. We should play to win. So there's a fine line, because in athletics, being the first or second option is a world of salary difference from being the fourth or fifth option, unless you have a special skill set, whether you're a great defensive player, a great shot blocker, but most of the time offensively, the 1 and 2 guys get paid the most. And so you averaging 12 points versus you averaging 20 points that can mean like $80 million. Wow. And so how do you find that balance? And I think I'm saying this more and more now, winning has become cool again. And I want to take credit for that with the Warriors, where we're saying we made winning cool again because we've seen guys sacrifice.
Right.
And I was able to sacrifice and win. Sean Livingston was able to sacrifice and win, and it extended our careers. And so you can make it up on the back end. Udonis Haslam's played 20 years. He sacrificed to stay in Miami, but he's been able to make a career of it and play 6-7 more years than he would be being the number one option on another team. So we're trying to figure out how do we, you can sacrifice but still reap the benefits, and there's an understanding that you're sacrificing. Now the tough part is, you got guys who are more valuable than their salary would say. And sometimes the team might take advantage of it, saying, we know your market value isn't that high because other folks in the league don't understand how valuable you are to us. And so sometimes you have those stories where guys get played way below their market value. Right. So it's a tricky situation. And hopefully, like I said before, the basketball side, is more than just stats. It's your value to the team, and you can be compensated fairly for that.
Okay, I know we're almost out of time. So what I'm going to do very quickly, going to give you a rapid fire thing. And this is stuff that I want you to be as provocative so we can just cut it out of context and make it go viral, right? Like give you all
Go crazy. Go crazy.
Go crazy. Okay. All right. The Dame trade situation.
What about it?
All right. Okay. That's good. Okay.
No. The Dame trade situation. Very interesting. That's a tough battle as well. Steve Kerr and I have had many conversations about this as well. I don't want to throw Steve under the bus, but I actually agree with Steve, but Dame Lillard is one of the top players in the NBA, and he wants to win. And if his organization isn't putting him in a position to win, then why should he have to suffer? And I'm not saying they're not trying to win, but that's normally what it is with superstar players. Like, are we in a position to legitimately have a shot at winning? Mm-hmm. And right now, the Portland Trail Blazers, I would say they aren't. Did they make the playoffs last year? No, I don't think they didn't make the playoffs last year. Mm-hmm. And Dame wants to win, and so on one side, you can't be upset at an athlete for wanting to be traded, but then on the other side, when he's not winning because the team isn't set up for him to win, you can't criticize him. So you can't say he's not a winner and he doesn't want to win, but then he asks for a trade and he wants to go somewhere, he wants to win. Now you're on him for that as well. And so it's just, you get put in that trick bag there as well.
Is Austin Reaves him?
Is he him? He's Austin Reaves.
I like
that person. No, I like Austin a lot. We've got to know each other a little bit. We're supposed to spend a little bit more time with each other. He's a big golfer, like really into golf. And so when you have a guy in the NBA that's into golf, we're like our own little cult in itself. And so he and I will get together and play some golf, and we can talk trash. He's a lot better than folks thought he was. He's a real basketball player, and that's why I'm a fan of his. And so he's situational. Like some teams, he would average more points than he does, and then other teams, you got some guys that may get in his way. But I think he helps. No matter what team he's on, he's going to help you win, which is a tall tale sign of what a real basketball player is. If you can go on every team in the NBA and help them win and be a valuable player, then you're a real basketball player. He's a real basketball player.
I just love his story. Okay, final question. Who from the business world do you can actually maybe hang in there, maybe get a one-day contract, or can actually, has some skills? Let's start with Jeff Jordan. Jeff...
Andre Iguodala. Oh, Jeff's my guy.
Jeff has never invited me to his game. I work with him. Right? He's never invited me to his game. Right? Like, I don't know what I have to do.
You've said this a couple of times. I think you should just let it go. Just be graceful about it and let it go.
Because So Jeff's getting older, so it's incredible that he's still able to get up and down the court. And he's a very cerebral player, I can tell. But also Dean Athanasia, he's the head of regional banking at Bank of America. He's on the top 100 all Yale team.
Yeah, boy. All right.
Football. There's they say a lot of D1 athletes, especially a lot of females, become they're the better marketers in the business world. Because they know how to work as a team, they know how to grind, they know how to problem solve. And so BayFC, which is the National Women's Soccer League, new franchise here in the Bay. I'm a part of the ownership group, and Sheryl Sandberg has this great initiative on women's leadership and how we're getting young girls into soccer, because there are parallels in Division I athletes and CEOs. And so we want to have more female women CEOs. And I think that's a great path to get them into sports at a young age, get them to working with others, problem solving, learning how to constructive criticism, being leaders. You got to lead by example. And that's a great pipeline. And so I'm really excited about that initiative.
I just want to point out that Andre took a question where I wanted him to trash talk Jeff and turn it into this inspiring answer about, female CEOs. You're so good at this. Okay, Andre, I'm going to let you go. Where do people find you online? What are you doing that you should check out? Obviously the podcast's coming back in October, that you said, season 3.
What's the plug? Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, give us a plug.
Yeah.
So I think October 2nd is a drop date for Point Forward season 3. We've had some amazing conversations. We're headed to New York for Fashion Week, Men's Fashion Week, where, business is booming there for athletes. You got PJ Tucker, you got Russell Westbrook, you got James Harden. All the top athletes are really getting into fashion with the brands, and that's a new athlete GDP in itself as well.
Wow.
And how we've been inspired and how we're leading the charge there. Michael Jordan's been great at that, but Point Forward's on the way. Got something big in the work. I'm going to work with one of the top producers in entertainment on a project I'm super excited about, and it's based around athletes and finance. I'm really looking forward to that one. I have a really good meeting. Today's this day. Tomorrow I have a big meeting on it with a writer. And so
wow. All right. Good tease.
Yeah. That's years out, but that one I'm looking forward to.
My goodness.
But I'm getting this. I'm getting to work. There's also the fund. We closed Fund 1 May 1st, and so we've been deploying capital for about a year now. So I'm super excited about the fund. So I'm busy. I'm in the doghouse at home because I'm too busy. Well, maybe I should do something with my wife. We get a job together. So
do a podcast. I love it. But I just want to say thank you so much for doing this.
She's right, I'm wrong. That's the title of the podcast.
I like it. Thank you so much for doing this. And look, I'm not saying this to blow hot air, right? Every time we had a conversation, I've just found you so genuinely just so fascinating to talk to, so curious about our world. And honestly, I could not have known that you're a basketball player, because you could just be a full-time, investor, and, you can get a job at Andreessen Horowitz anytime if you ever wanted. But no, thank you so much. This was a blast.
This was amazing. It was really great fun.
I'm keeping this recorded, and just I tell my wife I got a job.
There you go.
Anytime.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Andre.